Well, I am Lynn Fletcher. I am not Lisa Herrick. I am on the leadership team at 31st Street. Lisa is happily ensconced with grandchildren today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Um, I have had a kind of strange feeling lately. Um, I would actually call it cautious optimism.
Yep.
For much of the last year, it's really felt very dark and grim. And without getting too far out over my skis, because Amy Bunny Hill ski, I, I think we're starting to see some cracks, to feel,
Yes, we are.
you can feel it. I hear somebody saying they can feel it. The Trump's own Supreme Court has just come down against his tariffs. Other federal courts are ruling against the administration again and again and again. And his approval rating is continuing to fall. Currently, the last poll I saw, he's at 61% disapprove, which, fun fact, is more Americans who disapprove of him than who disapprove of either ants, the crawling kind, at 52%, or spiders at 57%, though he is still ahead of cockroaches who come in at 84% disapproval. Um, Also, I have been feeling something pretty strong coming from the people of Minnesota. I know you have too. Their courage, their determination in the face of ICE's horrors and abuses, they have really lit the way for all of us. I don't know, have you seen the videos of the singing resistance in Minnesota? I love this. I was going to show video, but I've decided not to. I'm going to put a link in the chat. My favorite one, because there's more than one, are 2,000 people standing in the freezing cold outside a hotel where ICE and Border Patrol agents are staying. And they sing, and I'm not going to sing, you'll be grateful for that. It's okay to change your mind. Show us your courage. Leave this behind. It's okay to change your mind, and you can join us. Join us here anytime. Rumi, the poet, said, if everything around seems dark, look again. You might be the light. And I feel that the people of Minnesota who've come out to protect their neighbors, they are the light. The folks, many of you I know, who are hanging signs on bridge brigades out in the cold and at No King's marches, you're the light. The lawyers fighting in court, they are the light. And we, all of us here at 31st Street, we're also the light. We find the right sweet spot candidates for our bottom up strategy, and we showcase and raise money for amazing groups like One House Strategies in Nebraska. You'll meet Adele today and hear all about them. Our Act Now newsletter, which comes out on Sunday evenings, helps you find the actions that speak to you and help you shine your own unique light. Things are changing. Light is breaking through, and we are all part of it. And honestly, that fact brings me joy, like almost as much as watching Alyssa Liu skate, but that kind of joy, that sort of freedom and lightness. Um, so we're all here to shine a light. And speaking about shining a light, I'm going to turn it over to our own Jim Shelton, who makes all of us understand better what is happening out there.
Great. And I'm gonna, sorry, I'm Jim. I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides because I got some kind of blinking light. I'm not sure why that is. So I'm the political analyst, and hopefully I can get this to come up and people can see and hear me. Great. Hope that works. Um, So, yeah, I'm going to pick up on that positive thrust because I think electorally, I mean, there's all the damage and so forth that the administration is doing, but electorally, the wind, in my view, is definitely at our back, and we need to seize the opportunity. You know, you have this issue, do you kind of overshoot or do you undershoot? And we need to make sure we, kind of get in the right place. So, just picking up on that, also that sentiment. So many things that Trump has done have been so bad and turned off voters, but Minneapolis was definitely a watershed event and set of events. So just a few other reasons for optimism, sort of getting more specific electorally, is that, of course, the Trump polling is abysmal. We have this voter intensity. Things have totally flipped. We have the more motivated voters this time, and it helps us to one degree or another in every election, in my view. So we are winning special elections decisively. The last sort of surprise was in Louisiana. We have great candidates. We have hundreds and hundreds of people stepping forward to be candidates at all level, and that's going to help us going forward. And we're far better organized than ever. Okay, so just a little bit on the polling. I think it's probably going to get even worse for Trump, but this is Elliot Morris, who is my best data guy, who puts together a composite of data showing that overall Trump's getting worse, worse on immigration and especially deportations. But the key thing electorally is actually inflation and cost of living. Those are the voters, the low information, the low income voters, Latinos, young people, even AAPI voters are coming more over to us. So, and here's this slide about what's called the generic ballot, assessing voter preference for Democratic Party candidates versus Republican Party candidates. It's kind of an insensitive measure, but it's actually ticked up fairly recently. It's about a preference of 8%. That may not sound like much, but it's actually amazing. It's actually awesome. That's sort of blue wave territory like we had in 18, and it's even moving more in our direction. So the bottom line is that we need to be moving more kind of on the, I won't call it overshooting, but we need to be shifting to a more aggressive policy, in my opinion. And that's why. Oh, I should say we're going to talk about mostly about Nebraska. But we have something very, very important going on in Virginia right now. And we have the potential of a Democratic pickup of four, which would be enough to flip the current House that we have. And it's interesting that if you recall in California, this is nothing against you Californians, but Proposition 50 got millions of dollars of attention for sort of the same amount of kind of situation. So there's two things that we're focusing on. One is there's a referendum, hopefully, if the courts allow it, April 21st, and we will be doing, Steve will talk about this later, definitely calling in alliance with other groups, but also probably some canvassing as well. It's a statewide referendum. But then when it comes to the actual election, if we get to that, this is the electoral map, and I took the version that was sort of the most conservative. And I think even these purple districts are like 1 and 2% in our favor in the most conservative, looking at 2022. And so we will try to weigh in on these depending upon what else is going on. But notice that none of them are really particularly close to the Washington area, although, we do have Virginia and Charlottesville. So I know she's going to organize some people down there for that. Anyway, keep that in mind. The other thing I wanted to just kind of put on the table was legislature. I think we're going to have a blue wave. And even if we don't, we should be focusing on the legislature because there's going to be a lot of attention on the Senate and the House, and that's what we will do also. But notice we had this abysmal thing that occurred a little over a decade ago where we lost almost 1,000 legislature seats. And now's the time for us to rectify that a lot. There's a good seven or so states that we can think about, raising support for state legislature candidates. And just to remind you, this is something we've done before. We did Virginia this past year and so forth. These are all, some of the reasons why legislatures are so very important. And we think we do this in a very strategic kind of way. But among other things, they need money. They're so important to our national political system. And we also believe that they bring out votes for midterm elections, higher up ballots as well. So now shifting to sort of the main topic, which is the U.S. Senate, which is, why we're supporting this accountability program we're going to talk about, and Adele is going to talk about, to remind people that we need 4 seats to pick up the Senate. Just think about the Supreme Court, think about all the other appointments and so forth. The 4 seats that people talk about in terms of pickup, I've got listed here. We can't depend we're going to get those 4. And we also have to defend these other 4 states. So we've been saying for some time, I think to our credit, that we needed to focus on the Senate, and we needed to focus on more shots on goal, these 3 states of Iowa, Alaska, and Nebraska. And I think we've been supporting some really good partners in Alaska. Last month, we had some great reports back from the groups in Iowa that we're working with. And now we're focusing on the Senate race in Nebraska. And we're not doing it by supporting Dan Osborne directly. We're doing it by doing this accountability campaign. So why Nebraska accountability? And this slide is really more about Nebraska than it is about accountability. Accountability is just kind of like a nice way is we're going to really go after this guy. Okay, so it's not really not that hard of a concept. The question is how to go about doing it. And it's a Super Bowl election, especially for the Senate, but other races. We think Nebraska, sure, it's been red for a long time, but it's got some moderate kind of forces in it, and it's really been hurt by MAGA policies, especially affecting rural areas. I think it could very well be ripe, especially for an independent like Dan Osborne. Their governor and the rest of the state governance is very unpopular in Nebraska as well. We've got some encouraging polling I'm going to show you. Not many people are focusing on this, so we need to get some attention on it. This is a general point that we've been making, which is that we really need to start moving into these sort of areas that we haven't done that well. We need to make progress in states like Iowa, Nebraska, and Alaska, and others, because the map is going to be shifting against us, and we need it anyway, do it anyway. And we have excellent partners, and we're going to hear from one. So here's the 2 fairly recent polls, amazingly consistent. 2 different polling organizations, both very good, and both of them just show Dan by 1 point to Ricketts, which we call the margin of effort. So this is exactly the kind of race that we like to get into. We like to get into a race where it's very close. And I think as time goes on, and this is, by the way, this is after $2 million that Ricketts has spent going after Dan in the media. So he's holding up very well. He did very well 2 years ago. And so it's really definitely worth a strong shot on goal. Okay, so now in the arena of accountability, I'm going to play for you something from Alaska, just to give you a sense of what they did in Alaska, and maybe they'll do something similar in Nebraska as well.
In Alaska, groceries already cost more than almost anywhere else. Senator Dan Sullivan voted for tariffs that drive those prices even higher. Fuel and heating bills keep climbing too, and our healthcare costs are soaring. But yes man Dan keeps saying yes to party leaders and voting for higher prices for Alaskans. Tell Senator Dan Sullivan to stop voting to raise our prices.
So just a couple things about this concept is you want to get in early with this kind of messaging to sort of set things, and you also want to be doing it consistently over time. Part of our messaging problem, in my view, is that we have this sort of one-offism. October, if somebody doing some message testing and decides to do this ad or that ad. And I really like the idea doing something consistently and through a lot of different kinds of media. So I wanted to just kind of point out, because sometimes it's a little confusing to people about who we're actually supporting and how over here in this corner is like where money goes into the system. We're working with the donor table called the Nebraska Donor Alliance. We've described this many times. These are folks that are in place to help us make contributions and to help the actors in the state coordinate with each other. They have a C3 and a C4, and they're going to have to be supporting implementing partners. One House Strategies, which is what Adele is with, they're with a long-standing, very astute set of professionals. They know Nebraska, and they're going to provide the sort of input and expertise and sort of management, if you will, to make this happen. So the goal for this is $125,000, and we will get from the donor table a one-to-one match for that. So that's going to be $250,000. That in and of itself can go a long way to getting started media work in a place like Nebraska. So that's the idea. Now we're raising both C4 non-tax deductible and C3 tax deductible, but we're only promoting the C4 part today, partly because it's more useful to them, but also because you can be more free about sort of partisan language. And so we're doing it that way. There's going to be a donation link in the chat. Appreciate if you would help us out there. But also, of course, my lovely, wonderful wife, sister, Mary is is looking for ambassadors for our fundraiser on March 7, and she's going to say something a little bit later. So with that, we'll turn it over to Adele Burke with One House Strategies.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my slides and share my screen. And let me know once I get that shared. You should be able to see this now, but let me know if you have any issues seeing it. And also try to keep an eye on the chat, but would love if folks, maybe Jim, if you wanted to lift up anything that pops up in the chat. Again, my name is Adele Burke, and I am the Senior Director of Initiatives at One House Strategies. One House Strategies is a firm that does consulting in Nebraska around political campaigns. So we run campaigns for a number of different candidates. Those include federal, state, and local candidates. We have a team of about 10 professionals with over 50 years of experience total. But I've personally worked in Nebraska politics for nearly 15 years. And that experience has included running state legislative and mayoral races and also leading policy for our local Planned Parenthood affiliate in Nebraska. So I am excited to share what Jim teed up, the program we're launching this year to make the case to voters that they should fire Senator Pete Ricketts in November. So before I get into the meat of the program itself, I wanted to share a few disclaimers about the information that I'll be sharing and kind of the specific program that I'll be talking about. So there will be two different accountability programs sort of running side by side. Yeah, I can try to speak up a little bit. And there's going to be a 501(c)(3) program, as well as a 501(c)(4) program. The 501(c)(3) program will be focusing on educating Nebraskans about Senator Ricketts' votes and Senator Ricketts' key positions. And then by contrast, the 501(c)(4) program will be making the case to voters directly that they should fire Ricketts in November. So what we're going to be talking about today is specifically the 501(c)(4) program, because we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of the electoral dynamics of that program. And I also wanted to give a little disclaimer that for the 501(c)(4) program, the Nebraska Donor Alliance doesn't accept earmarked contributions specific to that program, but I'm going to be describing a program that is a very large priority for the Nebraska Donor Alliance. So getting into the meat of the program itself, I wanted to share a little bit about Pete Ricketts and who he is, how we think we can build the case to voters to fire Pete Ricketts in November. He has been an influential figure in Nebraska for about 2 decades. His family is a family of billionaires. They own TD Ameritrade. So Ricketts ran unsuccessfully for the US Senate in 2006, and then ran for governor and served as governor from 2015 to 2023 when he was term limited. Then he immediately basically bought the election of his successor, current governor Jim Pillen. Governor Jim Pillen, once elected, turned around and appointed Pete Ricketts to our vacant Senate seat. So you can kind of see the corruption and grift that is happening with this this dynamic. And Ricketts was elected to serve a full term in his Senate seat in a special election in 2024. So what we know already is that Pete Ricketts is pretty unpopular with Nebraskans. We have polling that shows he is at about 43% approval in Nebraska, and that's statewide, and that's including all partisan registrations. So we know that there's a lot of reason that Nebraskans have to dislike him, but we also believe that there are a lot of issues that Nebraskans may not already know about Pete Ricketts and provide some additional room, especially amongst more moderate and conservative audiences, to continue to push against him. One of these is, again, his financial background and his identity as someone who is wealthy, connected with corporations. And Ricketts' own personal net worth is actually in the hundreds of millions, and his family is in the billions. He's used his wealth to put his thumb on the scale in Nebraska elections in a huge way. So over his time since he was first elected governor, he's donated at least $15 million to his political allies and causes in that time frame. This has included personally bankrolling campaigns to restore Nebraska's death penalty and to implement voter ID and to enshrine an abortion ban in Nebraska's state constitution. So between him and his family's wealth, they've really had a corrupting power and politicization of Nebraska politics in a way that we have not had as much in the past. Ricketts is also an outspoken opponent of things like medical marijuana that are extremely popular with Nebraskans. But Nebraska is one of about, I think, 3 states that has not implemented medical marijuana yet. Feels kind of wild, probably. But we have run into a lot of barriers in the past, and that a lot of that is due to Pete Ricketts and his wealth stopping measures for medical marijuana from being on the ballot. We did have a measure pass in 2024 with over 70% of the vote, but because of Ricketts and Governor Jim Pillen, that has not been implemented, and Nebraskans still don't have access. So the idea of these elected officials interfering with the will of the voters is something that is really salient in Nebraska. Ricketts has also taken a lot of unpopular votes and positions with that are unpopular with Nebraskans. So we know the big beautiful bill cut Medicaid funding. Obviously, that impacts a lot of Nebraska families' access to healthcare, but it also impacts rural hospitals in a way that's really salient with Nebraskans. And then President Trump's tariffs and his continued support of those tariffs is something that I think Nebraskans need to know about and will be really persuasive to them. But these are all things that we expect are going to be persuasive to Nebraskans. What we're going to be doing in the next month is fielding a poll so that we'll know exactly what Nebraskans are most persuaded by in terms of Ricketts' background and his votes in other issue positions. So that will inform ultimately the kinds of programming that we do, even though we already have a pretty decent intuition about what the types of things we'll focus on will be. And I'll just pause for a second and make sure I don't have any questions that pop up.
Adele, I'm Aaron. I will be logging the questions for you. So when you finish your presentation, then I'll pose them to you. So you can go ahead.
Okay, great, perfect. Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
So talking about the specific tactics that we're using for the program, I wanted to get into a little bit more detail about what specifically we'll be doing. So the majority of the program will be paid media. And the goal of paid media is always to reach both a targeted and also an expansive audience sort of simultaneously. We want to reach more conservative and moderate Nebraskans who are likely midterm voters. But we also want to make sure that we are blanketing the state with one consistent message. So the map that you see here on this slide, I hope is some helpful context for what Nebraska is like in terms of its population density and its partisan registration. So those huge blue dots on the eastern side of the state are Omaha and Lincoln. And then you'll see there's a very sparse population throughout the rest of the state. Omaha and Lincoln are over 50% of the state population. What we're going to do is obviously do some paid media that is reaching into the Omaha and Lincoln area specifically. So those TV markets. But then we also want to make sure that we're reaching rural radio, right? We want to make sure that we're doing targeted digital that reaches people who are conservative and moderate outside of the major metro areas. And then we also are doing targeted mail. So the multiple mail pieces will be targeted at that more moderate conservative audience. And the great thing about mail is that you can drive home a message consistently to an extremely targeted audience. So it's really surround sound strategy as far as getting our message out about Ricketts. What I wanted to show you, besides obviously Jim showed the video of the Alaska ad, we definitely want to do things that are similar to that on the TV and the digital streaming front. And we've worked with Ship Creek Group out of Alaska and plan to work with Ship Creek Group on our digital and our TV. So they have a lot of experience with accountability programs and excited to work with them. But the couple of examples that you see here are more Nebraska specific programs that we've done previously at One House Strategies through our 501c4 program, Your Nebraska. So there is a piece that is targeting Governor Pillen, and there's a piece that's targeting the Nebraska legislature, again, on this topic of not respecting the will of the voters that has been really salient. What we want to do is really lean into our experience with accountability programs. And I will say as a side note, the Nebraska legislature is fascinating. So if you ever want to know more about the Nebraska legislature, I could talk about that for hours. But that has been kind of the focus of a lot of our accountability work in the past. The other component of the program besides paid media will be our grassroots organizing and earned media program. And this will look like a couple of different components. One of those components is working with Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana and Krista Eggers, who leads that organization, on an organizing program specifically around the issue of medical marijuana that I raised earlier. So Krista is doing a statewide town hall. You'll see all the way across the state, all the way from Lincoln to Scottsbluff, talking about basically the impact of these elected officials interfering with the will of the voters on that issue. And she's specifically recruiting people who have signed the petition or who collected signatures to then inform that audience. And we know that these are people who are usually not quite as likely voters. So if we can turn them out on the basis of their dislike of rickets, that we can add to the electorate in that way, which is going to be really beneficial. We also are going to have a second component of our organizing program that's going to be informed by our research into what are the most salient issues when it comes to peat rickets. Components of that might look like storytellers or other validators who can speak to how specific issues impact them, their families, their communities. We'll have earned media events. So I saw this great earned media accountability in another state recently where it was a giant inflatable golden calf that someone brought in to demonstrate someone's corruption and prioritizing the ultra wealthy, right? So that's the type of big earned media thing that we would do to try to capture some like local TV coverage and things like that. Bird dogging is another thing that you may or may not be familiar with. It's essentially just cornering an elected official at one of their events, taking video of it, trying to boost that on social media, or trying to get traditional media to observe that interaction and then boost it, through their channels. So that can be an effective method as well. And then op-eds, other kind of traditional ways of getting earned media. And when I say that we're going to be driven by the most salient issues, what that could look like is if we find out that rickets votes to undermine people's access to healthcare is one of the most effective messages, then we will recruit healthcare storytellers, people who are personally impacted by not being able to access Medicaid or who have other health issues that are implicated by rickets votes. If we find out that tariffs are one of the most important issues, maybe we will have farmers and ranchers speaking about that issue. So we're going to try to be very targeted about the way that we do this. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the actual vehicles that we're using for the program. And by vehicles, I mean, like, what are the entities that we're using for the program? So Jim already talked about this a little bit. We're fundraising now into the Nebraska Donor Alliance. And so for the program that I'm talking about specifically, the Nebraska Donor Alliance is a 501c4 organization. There's also another 501c3 organization that we're raising funds into for that component, that program. And then there will be another program, or there will be another entity that actually runs the ads. So that'll be the paid for by line. That won't be Nebraska Donor Alliance, but they'll be getting the funds from Nebraska Donor Alliance into these new entities. And so that'll be called Better Nebraska. And then in terms of timeline, right now, initial polling draft is happening. We are completing some research on Senator Ricketts right now that really goes into depth on, what are investments that Ricketts has done into companies that may be really unpopular with Nebraskans. Examples of things like that that are a little less obvious, but things we really want to know to be able to persuade Nebraskans. In March, we'll be recruiting those grassroots organizers and doing creative production for the TV and digital and mail. April to May looks like early paid media. And then April through August, the grassroots organizers will be on the ground executing these earned media and grassroots tactics. And then in June, we'll be basically reloading the paid media program. We're going to do additional polling to see are Nebraskans moving in their perception of rickets based on the issues that we're highlighting? So how effective are we being, and where can we pivot? And then additional creative production for the ads based on the polling that we do the second round. And then July through August looks like additional paid media. The program will wrap up toward the end of August. The goal here is really to lay the foundation of making the case for firing Pete Ricketts. And then, other programs in the ecosystem will potentially benefit from that. I also wanted to share, Jim was talking a lot about Nebraska and the importance of Nebraska. And I wanted to put an exclamation point on that. And Nebraska is a really unique state this year because we have a Senate race, we have a congressional race, we have a governor's race where Governor Jim Pillen is quite unpopular with Nebraskans. And we also have a dynamic with our state legislature where we can overcome a supermajority of Republican dominance in Nebraska. So what we're going to be doing with our program with accountability for Pete Ricketts is complementary with a lot of the other things that are happening in Nebraska's ecosystem. A lot of shared themes around respecting the will of the voters, which is extremely salient with Nebraskans right now. And also all of these elected officials have shown their fealty to President Trump. So really highlighting how the Trump administration has been harmful to Nebraskans. And that is actually all that I have. So yeah, happy to move into questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Adele. That was a fantastic, really organized and clear presentation. I'm Aaron Hamburger. I do membership here at 31st Street Swing Left, and I also moderate the questions that come in the chat. And Adele, people are very interested in your presentation because there's a lot of active questions. So why don't we just get right into it? A quick definition of terms. What is earned media? Can you just quickly explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can think about media in two different types. There's paid media, which is if I pay to run TV ads, if I pay to run digital ads. And then earned media is the existing media infrastructure like local TV, newspapers, things like that, picking up on a story and then providing us that amplification without us having to pay for it. So it's the difference between a newspaper ad that you buy and a newspaper article that's written about your program.
Great. Another question that has come up is this basically a way to support Dan Osborne without sort of staining him by saying he's a closet Democrat? And what can this effort do that Dan Osborne's campaign cannot do?
What I would say, using a 501c4 nonpartisan lens, is that we want to just make the case to voters that Pete Ricketts is not the person that should be representing them, right? So that is the main thing that we're trying to portray with this program. Obviously, that can have implications for the rest of the electoral ecosystem. Voters are going to be hearing this program. They're going to be hearing paid ads from Dan Osborne's campaign. So, they can come to conclusions, but our goal is just to make the case that Pete Ricketts should not be in office anymore. And sorry, what was the second half of that question?
I think the person was saying, is this a way that Osborne doesn't look like he's just like a Democratic stooge? And is it like, what can this do that Osborne's campaign cannot do?
Yeah, I think we'll maybe be speaking some of the same language as the Osborne campaign in terms of, they have been pretty aggressive about pointing out Pete Ricketts' flaws, the votes that he's taken. I mean, I encourage you to follow Dan Osborne on social media. He's extremely adept with social media and making that argument about Ricketts. But we have a little bit more flexibility with this program in terms of how it is funded. Congressional candidates are limited in the amount of funding that they can get from individuals. So those are some of the distinctions between the type of program that we have and the type of work that he can do. And I will say that our program won't focus on any positives around Dan Osborne. We won't talk about Dan Osborne at all. So in that respect, we will be entirely focused on the case against Pete Ricketts.
So, in other words, Dan Osborne, it's his job to make the case for Dan Osborne, and your job is going to be to kind of help to amplify the negatives of Ricketts. It's like part of the, because one of the questions that came up in the chat is like, oh, are we just doing negative campaigning now? And I think what we're saying is like, this is one piece of a multi-headed campaign.
Yeah.
Okay, another question, and I see people are going crazy in the chat, which is great. Victoria, I will get to your follow-up in a minute, but there was another question that came up. Will you be using social media in your effort?
Yeah, so that'll look like the paid digital ads. So those digital ads will be a combination of like video streaming ads, but then we'll also have some static non-video digital ads that would appear on social media.
Great. Okay, another question has been about will Osborne caucus with the Democrats? If not, what impact on control of the Senate? And Dre actually talked about this in the chat, but I just wanted to lift that up. Osborne says he will not caucus with either party, but it's worth noting that if he wins, there will be one fewer vote in the Senate for John Thune as the Republican majority leader, and one fewer vote for MAGA Supreme Court and federal judiciary members. Which leads to the next question, which is on what issues will Osborne tend to agree with Republicans rather than the Democrats? Would he vote perhaps for like a right-leaning Supreme Court judge?
So I couldn't, really speak to that, not being from Osborne's campaign, but one thing that I can just say as a, observer of his campaign is that he has shown a little bit more conservative leaning on like law enforcement. So that would be like one specific example where I think he is speaking more to like the conservative Nebraska voice.
Great. Another question. What was Ricketts' record as governor and why is he so against medical cannabis?
Yeah, so Ricketts was basically about as conservative as you can get as governor. He signed into law multiple bills that restricted abortion access. While he was governor, the Nebraska legislature passed a bill very narrowly to repeal the death penalty in our state. And he spent large amounts of money personally investing in the campaign to restore the death penalty in Nebraska. So that's another issue that he was really active on. Basically, you name the issue, he was super conservative about it. Charter schools, all that kind of stuff. And the medical marijuana issue, it's kind of interesting because Pete Ricketts has not only been like opposed to marijuana, but like he's been very kind of like marmish, like weird about it, saying like marijuana will kill your kids, right? So just like these kind of outlandish sounding quotes from Senator Ricketts. And yeah, he's just been consistently opposed to that issue. He worked basically hand in hand with a local county attorney to challenge multiple attempts to get that issue on the ballot in the past, and then blocked it from ballot access. And then, poured money into campaign efforts to stop that policy from passing.
Great, thank you. What do Nebraska Republicans think that the current administration is doing right? What do they like? And also, if Ricketts is so unpopular, like what's the popularity of Ricketts and the current administration? What is that based on?
Yeah, so I think that there is a really populist streak amongst a lot of Nebraskans, which actually it's been interesting to see how that has aligned with a lot of the way that Dan Osborne has been speaking to Nebraskans. Speaking about and I think Trump appeals to that populist streak, right? He is trying to speak as a man of the people, right? He's like plain spoken, all this kind of stuff. So like there's some stylistic ways in which I think Nebraskans agree with Trump. I think there's issues around like affordability and immigration and things like that that just really were resonant with Nebraskans in 2024. Maybe they find a little less believable now, but they still, don't want to totally, pivot on Trump. So, Trump is more popular than Ricketts in Nebraska, but the polling that we've seen is not as popular as you would think.
Hmm.
So I think compared to 2024, there's a little bit more resistance to Trump based on some of these like tariffs and other things that we're seeing.
Great, thanks. Okay, another question that came up, and this is a question both for us at 31st Street, but maybe you can also speak to this as well, is there's some concern about like negative campaigning. Are we increasingly, why is negative campaigning so necessary? Should we be making a more affirmative case? What is the role of negative campaigning in the current environment?
Yeah, so what I would say is I don't think that the case against Pete Ricketts relies on anything that's a misrepresentation of reality, right? I think it's important that Nebraskans understand that voting for Pete Ricketts is against their interests. And I think because it's a party line vote a lot of times, they don't really realize that what their elected official is doing is not benefiting them. So I think there's a lot of value in simply educating voters about what the votes have been. We also know that that kind of informational, oppositional, I wouldn't say necessarily negative, but like oppositional kind of campaigning is actually effective. And that's why people continue to use it in political spheres. So unfortunately or fortunately, it is actually pretty effective.
Yeah, let me support all that. I mean, we're telling the truth, unlike the Republicans when they do their smearing. We're telling the truth, but there is evidence that, that people don't know about this about him. A lot of low information that's against their interests. There is, the potential for the campaign to be kind of more positive if they want to be. Well, one reason we got more involved, and in addition to feeling like it works, is that the Alaska 907 initiative really seems to be pretty effective in the way they're going about it. So it's a good model that, so we found this opportunity in Nebraska where they wanted to do something like that. So we kind of seized on it over.
Great. Okay, and I think that answers the question that somebody had. Why has this decision been taken? You've
Yeah.
seen some proven results with that, but certainly it's not the only thing we're going to be doing this entire year. It's one of the tools that we have in our toolkit. Okay, another question: what themes is Ricketts going to use to kind of shoot back against this? How can he defend himself? I'm sure he's aware of what you're doing, and what's he going to do?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes there's a little hesitancy to go the accountability route because then you're sort of baiting the person to be spending earlier, right? We're not worried about that in this case because Ricketts already spent nearly $5 million last year in 2025 between his campaign and affiliated PACs in support of his candidacy. So he has been outspending on TV ads very, very early in the cycle. And a lot of that has been negative against Dan Osborne, especially on the part of his PACs. So, Ricketts has deep, deep pockets and is already spending from them. So, you know, we gotta do what we can.
Great. All right. There's a few more questions in the chat, like about ICE, and actually the answers have sort of been in the chat already. Yes, ICE apparently has been active in Nebraska, so I think people can look at that as well. But I think what we'll do now is we have a couple other things we need to get to in our program for today. So can we all give Adele a big, big hand? Thank you so much for spending time with us. And then at the end of our formal meeting at 5 o'clock, we have a time for like informal chat. And so, Adele, if you want to stay on for that, you're welcome to. So people can ask questions at that point as well. But we do want to move forward. So I'm going to go ahead, hand the mic over to Mary Pence, who has something else Nebraska related to share with us.
Thanks, Aaron. Hello, everyone. So I want to tell you about something very concrete and specific and very rewarding that you can do in the fight to save our democracy. And that is to be what we call an ambassador for our fundraiser to raise money to hold Pete Ricketts accountable, as you've just heard. Now, in order to fill this role, you need to be able to do three things. One, you have to be able to hit the click on the forward button at the bottom of an email containing the invitation and then delete the language that's now extraneous. That's number one. Number two, you need to be able to comb your network and identify at least 10 people that you think, based on something, some conversation you've had, or maybe an email that they wrote that you read about, um, 10 people that you believe share your passion for saving our democracy. And when you've identified those 10 people, then you just write a short little intro to the invitation to connect with the particular person you're inviting. So, if you're writing to your college roommate, say, you might reference some conversation you had or something that has come up that you have both shared your enthusiasm for saving our democracy. So those are the only you have to be able to do to be an ambassador. And when I say it's rewarding, what I mean is, you know, whenever I am feeling particularly helpless and anxious and furious about what the latest outrageous thing is that's happened, the one thing that consistently makes me feel better is to take some action. And if you just spend a few minutes and send out one or two or three of these invitations, I can only speak for myself, but it really makes me feel better. So, if you have the ability to do those three things, and if you would be willing to be an ambassador, I will put my email in the chat and I ask you to just send me your name. I would also like to say that if you're somebody who's never been an ambassador before, then we particularly need you because that means most likely you'll be reaching out to folks who haven't heard about the wonderful work that 31st Street has done and is doing. So you're bringing what I'm going to kind of crudely call fresh meat into the process. So new people are particularly welcome, but old folks also. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, Mary. All right. I believe Steve is next. He had something that he wanted to share. Is that correct?
That's correct, Aaron. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. I'm Steve Anders, and I'm on the 31st Streets Virginia team, along with George, Lynn, Jim, and Roberta as the leaders of that team. We have a quick update on what's going on in Virginia. In November 2025, in the elections, Virginia sent a message of hope to the nation that we are determined to fight back against the violent and cruel federal administration. Now, just a few months later, Virginia has the opportunity to do that again. This time, the stakes are even higher, and we need all of you and everyone you know to mobilize Virginians to vote yes on the redistricting amendment in April. So, as I said, this could be a statewide referendum to allow temporary redistricting in Virginia and on April 21st. So here's the backstory. 7 red states have either already redistricted or have plans to do that to gain red seats in Congress in the midterm. In Virginia, we're fighting back. And unlike those other red states, we're letting Virginian voters decide whether we should allow this to happen. So there's going to be that special election on April 21st with early in-person voting starting on March 6th. You may have heard that there have been some legal challenges along the way from a partisan judge down in southwestern Virginia, deep red southwestern Virginia. These challenges were expected, and we frankly expect more, but we also expect them to be overcome and that the referendum will be held on schedule. And again, this could mean flipping, as Jim said at the very top of the call, flipping 4 to 5 seats in Virginia in the Virginia seats in the House of Representatives. It's a special election, and most of us on this call know for special elections, it's all about turnout. So as Jim mentioned, we plan to have some phone banking and canvassing opportunities as soon as they get in place, which should be soon. We're going to include them in the newsletter as these things become available. So keep your eyes out for them in the next few weeks. And we appreciate all the support you can do to help make Virginia a blue state and flip the House in the midterms. Thanks.
Great.
Back to you, Aaron and Lynn.
Thank you, Steve. That's awesome. Michelle, you also have something to share.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Hainback. I'm also a member of the 31st Street Leadership Team. As Steve just mentioned, a little bit later on this spring, we will have multiple ways for all of us volunteers to interact with voters directly through canvassing and phone banking. Right now, for those of you who are eager to get your feet wet, so to speak, and warm up your skills from last year for direct voter contact, I encourage you to sign up for a Swing Left Ground Truth phone bank. I've done the training and the phone banking, and they're very good. It's a little bit of a different approach. We're calling voters in swing districts to listen to them, to hear what their concerns are. The script asks, are you likely to vote? How likely are you to vote on a scale from 0 to 10? And how likely are you to vote Democrat on a scale from 0 to 10? And what issues keep you up at night? What would you, if you were able to have a conversation with your state legislature or congressperson, what would you want to say to him or her? So these conversations are, for me, I've done a lot of phone banking, I'm finding them a real fresh thing to be doing. I'm going to put in the link, the way to sign up for the training and the way to sign up for a phone bank. You do have to expect that, I was on for about half an hour today, and I had one good conversation and 30 minutes of dialing. So there are a lot of hangups and wrong numbers, but the conversation I had was good. And it's the few times I've done this a few times, and the few conversations I've had have been with people who don't vote regularly. This was an older man today who said he would never vote for a Republican. Don't blame him for Trump being in office. He didn't vote for him, but actually he didn't vote for anybody. He didn't vote. So that's the type of person we need to get out to vote this fall. And I think if he votes, his wife will vote. I could hear her in the background. So, and that information is being taken by Swing Left and will eventually be turned over to candidates post-primaries, actually, they told me. So I'm going to put those links in, and I hope to see you on a phone bank soon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, Lynn, take it away.
I'm taking it away to say we pride ourselves in ending on time, and it's 5:01. We're pretty darn close. And Michelle's going to put those links in, and I think those links are also going to be in the Sunday newsletter. Thank you, Adele. Thank you, everyone. Please stick around if you are able, because there were so many questions, and this is our chance to just, everybody can talk. You can unmute. I don't mean all at once, but you'll unmute, and we'll field all those questions. And if everybody have a great Sunday evening.
Yeah, I'm seeing the snow starting to fall. There was a really interesting question that John Medallia had in the chat. If the Virginia Supreme Court rules against the ruling, will it be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court? Jim, do you have any information on that? Like, could that
Steve would be, I doubt it, but Steve, what do you think?
I don't think so, but of course we saw what happened in California. So yeah, if someone is more lawyer-esque than me, I'll look for their input. And I don't know, Peter, are you responding to that or something else?
I think that it goes to the Virginia Supreme Court, and my constitutional law class was 40 some years ago. Things have changed. And so I would say that if anybody can appeal, the question is whether they would take the appeal or whether it would go to a shadow docket and be addressed. But they did not knock down California, and I think Virginia is on a very similar, constitutional footing. So
great.
Good opinion.
Okay, I'm going with Lynn. I like that answer. Peter Hayward, you have a hand up.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so one of the things that I'm personally freaking out about is the prospect of significant interference in the elections by the Trump administration, posting ICE agents at polling places and the like. I know a lot of other people are concerned about this, but I wonder if any of the folks on this call have a view of what we can be doing to prevent that, or whether, 31st Street is doing anything to counter those measures.
Okay, Jim.
Well, I'm just going to put in the link in the chat, an article by Nicholas Grossman, where he goes very carefully into sort of the various scenarios. And the bottom line is he feels like, we need to be on guard, we need to fight, we need to support the lawyers and so forth. But he thinks that, we'll pull through. Both Simon Rosenberg and Robert Hubble sort of have have sort of recommended this article. So I think it's quite good. As far as what we're doing, the only thing that we're doing is that on our website, we're supporting some legal champions that that people can donate to that we think will help the cause. I mean, we're staying focused on the election, honestly, Peter.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thank you.
I think it also speaks to we need to like drive up turnout, and we need to get people like that person that Michelle was talking to on the phone. We need to get those voters who like, might not be intimidated by ICE, but just like stayed home, and get them to the polls too, so that like the degree of victory is so large that it can't be denied. So I think the more work we can do on that end, driving up the margins, the better. Thanks, Jim, for putting in that article. I'm going to click on it myself. Okay, other questions and thoughts?
Hi. I'm just taking down that article you recommended, and I'm wondering what groups that are registering voters are particularly good. There's a bunch of them now, and there's some that focus on young people, but have you looked into them at all?
I actually think, and maybe Judy could help with this, but the group that Focus for Democracy, and I can never remember, they've got a C3 and they've got a C4, Center for something or other, and I'll look it up and I send it to you. They're really, really good at actually, believe it or not, targeted mail to registered people, and it's well researched that I think they're very good. So were you thinking about making a donation, Diane, or I know you
A
were doing voter.
donation or volunteering or anything. I think one of the things I've read is that when they send something through the mail and they send you what you need to fill out, it's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
So that is a good idea.
Yeah, and yeah. So I know you did a lot of voter registration yourself, Diane. We're counting on you for doing that in Pennsylvania this year as well.
Oh, I'm up for it whenever you guys want to get started.
Okay, Steve, you have your hand up.
Hey, Aaron, thanks. While we have a second, I wanted to plug mark your calendars on Tuesday, April 7th. Elizabeth Chur, who wrote the book about convincing people to vote and how important it is to have these conversations. And like Michelle talked about with Ground Truth, and so many organizations are getting deeper in phone banking and canvassing and how we do that. We're going to have her back to do another webinar. She did one for us about a year ago. The webinar is how do you turn I don't vote into the start, not the end of the conversation. And we'll have the details on that and the link coming up soon. But if you can mark your calendar for Tuesday, April 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. More to come on that. They're always really interesting. And I found, even if you've done it, doing it again and again just makes you better at having conversations, not only phone banking, canvassing, but just talking to friends and neighbors that you might be not sure how to have that conversation. This will equip you to do that. Thanks.
Great. I feel like go ahead, Jim.
Did we do all the Nebraska questions? We still got Adele here. So maybe what about the governor's race? You said something about that, but I thought you said told me you were doing a separate new accountability on the governor's race. Maybe there's some synergy there. Maybe I missed it. I don't know.
Yeah, so we are definitely also doing an accountability program in the governor's race. Governor Jim Pillen is even less popular than Ricketts is. He's in like the high 30s, low 40s in terms of popularity, depending on the poll. He has numerous corruption scandals, including a $2.5 million no bid contract that a close personal friend of his received. Potentially a mistress of his. There's a lot of vulnerabilities that Jim Pillen has. And I was talking a little bit at the end about some of the shared issues. I mean, Pillen and Ricketts are close political allies. One funded the other, and then Pillen appointed Ricketts to fill a vacant seat. So it was sort of a quid pro quo potentially situation. But yeah, and then talking about all the different local and federal issues where they align that are unpopular.
Maybe you mentioned this and I missed it, but Nebraska has this blue dot congressional district
Yeah.
that votes with us in the Electoral College. So the governorship and the legislature is important just for that.
Yeah.
Sandra,
Absolutely.
you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I really liked your presentation, but query, from what I saw on the screen, we give the money and then it could go anywhere you want it to go. Does that mean giving money to be used against Ricketts might instead be used against in the governor's race or else? I mean,
No,
Yeah.
focused is money?
this money is for Ricketts accountability. We're hoping there
Just
might be
Ricketts
some
accountability.
spillover that might help some of the other races, that's all.
Mostly it's just a technical disclaimer because we can't technically accept an earmarked contribution without having to then report that. So we just want to be clear that any money that we get it's not technically earmarked, but we are committed to fully funding the Ricketts Accountability Program. So that it's a large priority for us. And so that's why I've focused my time.
Good. Walter.
Adele, two questions for you. Because so much of the strategy for 31st Street Swing Left is sort of focused on key races sort of under the radar screen. And I can speak because I live in the Boston area. So needless to say, the Senate race in Maine is getting a lot of attention. But my network won't know much, quite frankly, about what's going on in Nebraska. And has there been any kind of national coverage so far on this race? I mean, what would help me if there was, example, stories in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or CNN or things that I could send along to my network to kind of help them bring them up to speed about what's going on there. If that could be shared, that would be a big help. Number two, as I recall, I think Dan Osborne just narrowly lost. I think it was 2 years ago. So there clearly there's some Achilles heels of sorts, and in this political piranha age that we live in, are there any Achilles heels that could come back to haunt him that the Republicans could leverage as this race heats up toward November?
So one thing that I would,
Loaded
yeah, so I'm happy to share with Jim some articles about Dan Osborne, like in New York Times and other national outlets. And I will say that Osborne is already polling better than he polled at the end of the 2024 race and how he actually performed. So he lost by a little over 6% in 2024. And he actually overperformed Kamala Harris by 14 points in Nebraska. So I think one of the most significant overperformances in a Senate race that year. And then he actually, you saw some of the polls that Jim showed earlier that showed him within 1 percentage point And that has been consistent since last fall through up until within the last week. There's been another poll that showed him within 1 percentage point of rickets, and that's despite the over $5 million of spending over the last year by He Ricketts. So I actually think that Osborne is better positioned, and part of that is because Ricketts is less popular than Fisher is.
And Trump's not on the ballot too, which we know
Right.
has a distorting effect.
So Wally, it sounds like you're going to be an ambassador.
I'm looking at my schedule. Yeah, Jim, I'll reach out to my network.
Okay, that counts. All right, we're putting you down. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Coates, you have a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Adele, for your presentation. I wanted to ask about the impact of MAGA policies on farmers. You haven't mentioned farmers' issues at all, and these came up a lot in the Iowa discussions, and I just wanted to know what you thought.
Yeah, so tariffs are one of the areas where we really think that we can drive a wedge with the more conservative and rural voters because they are being hurt by the tariff policies. And I think that we just need to continue to hammer home how painful tariffs have been for farmers and ranchers. And then the issue of the Argentinian beef specifically, like increasing that supply, directly hurts Nebraska ranchers. They're aware of that issue, but just making sure that that stays forefront in their minds when they're hearing all of these other things about the race is going to be important.
That's great. Okay, I think we have time for one final comment for Dre, and then we have to end at 5:15. Dre.
Adele, I have a quick question. Do you guys have a budget that do you have a amount of money you're wanting to raise, or you just want to raise as much as you can? Do you have, that's my question.
Yeah, so the 501c4 program budget is 1.2 million, and the 501c3 component is about 2.2 million.
Great, thanks.
We'll try to make a dent in that. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
This was great.
Great meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, stay warm, stay safe. The snow's coming down.